Well, hey there, freaks. It's your boy Marty Bent here to introduce this week's episode of Tales from the Crypt. Matt Odell and I had the immense pleasure of sitting down with Wiz and Steve Jain from the Bisque team. A lot of Bisque talk in this episode, which is great talk. The nature of non-custodial exchanges, why they're important, why people should care about their privacy, how the incumbent financial system that we currently are subjected to disregards our privacy and probably makes us worse off in the long run because of all the KYC, AML compliance that they put us through. On top of that, we talked about some war stories throughout the years. Wiz is a very fascinating person within Bitcoin in particular. You guys are going to hear some cool stories about the space back in the day, specifically around the DAO hack and the hard fork of Ethereum around that period. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I know I did. I thoroughly did. I was very fortunate to have Wiz in person in the studio. Very gracious for him traveling to come make this happen. It's very humbling, and it was great to meet these gentlemen in person and hear their story and hear more about Bisque. I think you guys are going to like it as well. And I think it is going to be a project that becomes more and more popular in this space years to come. We forget how early on we are here. This episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by the Cash App. As you know, as you freaks already know, you've been listening to this for a while, Cash App is the simplest way to send and save money. You can stack sats on the app. You can send sats off the app. You can use their boost program to go to a merchant and save money. You can do it. They're just trying to help you be better with your money. Now, it's the simplest way to try to grow your money. Introducing Cash App Investing. Unlike investing tools that only let you buy entire shares of a stock, Cash App lets you instantly invest as little or as much as you want. We're buying slivers of shares here, freaks. This way, when your favorite company's stock is just a little bit too expensive, you can still own a piece with as little as $1. $1. You can spend $1 on a sliver of a share. And because Cash App is directly connected to your bank account, there are no 4 to 5 day waiting periods for inbound transfers, so you can start investing today. Brokerage services are provided by Cash App Investing, a subsidiary of Square and member SIPC. As always, when you sign up, use the code STACKINGSATS. That's one word. You're now going to get $10, and Cash App will send $10 to our good friends at Owls Lacrosse. Owls Lacrosse. Stacking Sats. One word. Pump it. Share it with your family and friends who have not downloaded the Cash App yet. Let's get Owls all the money that we can. Download the Cash App today from the App Store or the Google Play Store. Stacking Sats. This episode is also brought to you by our good friends at Casa. Freaks, how confident are you in your key security? How protected are your seed phrases? Have you gotten set up with a multi-sig yet? Our friends at Casa have drummed up one of the smartest and most secure ways to hodl your Bitcoin. No KYC, no altcoins, no percentage fees on your Bitcoin. No one's standing between you and your keys. Get peace of mind with one of the world's most secure multi-sigs. Use the promo code TFTC, and you're going to get up to $250 off your Casa memberships. What's a Casa membership, you ask? They have different packages depending on how much Bitcoin you want to put in a multi-sig address with them. For serious hodlers, if you're a diamond or platinum member, you're going to get 24/7 VIP service, dedicated client advisor, and custom onboarding and OPSEC plan. Casa is Bitcoin only, focused only on Bitcoin and Lightning and on security only. So email them if you want to figure out how their product works at membership@team.casa. They're going to give you a free demo, and you can put them to the test for your hardest OPSEC questions. Again, use the code TFTC to get up to $250 off. If you just want to check out their multi-sig setup, go to keys.casa/keymaster. Check them out. Use the code TFTC. Secure those Bitcoins. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I know Matt and I certainly did.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. It's your boy Marty Bent here. It's Thursday. On a Thursday afternoon with two very special guests, two team members from the Bisque project, and we got Matt Odell as well.
What's up, freaks?
I'd like to introduce you freaks to Wiz and Steve Jain. Thank you so much for coming.
Hey, cypherpunks.
Okay, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so this is going to be a big Bisque episode. We're going to get to Bisque. We just had a long conversation warming up before we hit record. I think we should start what can segue nicely into Bisque is starting with you, Wiz, go all the way back to the DAO hack, mining Ethereum Classic after the hard fork, state transition, bailout, whatever you want to call it. That's one. So for you freaks that don't know, Wiz is an OG in the space who's done some incredibly cool stuff. This being one of the coolest things, I think, mining Ethereum Classic to keep the chain alive. Why did you do it?
Yeah. So in case you don't know, Ethereum had this smart contract called the DAO. It was the Slockit DAO.
Slockit.
Yeah. Anyway, they got hacked because of some horrible security vulnerabilities in their smart contract, and this attacker drew out just millions and millions of dollars worth of stolen Ethereum token. And of course, the founders of the Slockit DAO, also being some of the same people who are founding Ethereum, they said, oh, no problem. We'll just do a hard fork, roll back the transactions, and do a chargeback, and it'll be totally fine. And if you're a cypherpunk, you know that rule number one of cryptocurrencies is that you have this immutable blockchain technology, and you don't roll back transactions, you don't do a chargeback, because that would just be like a bank. If your credit card gets hacked, you call up American Express, hey, I got hacked. Oh, no problem. We'll just take it off the bill, right? And this is what Ethereum's trying to do. So me being the guy with a warehouse full of GPUs at the time, it was probably like only 0.2% of the Ethereum mining hash power. I knew that Ethereum, the legacy blockchain, it was called like Ethereum Classic at the time, I guess. We were just coming up with this name, would still be around. Like, there's no way this is just going to die out, because censorship as a feature is not going to be very popular. And so there's this command line argument on the Ethereum node. You could do reject DAO fork. So I just kept mining on the old consensus rules, and my 0.2% on the Ethereum chain became something like 50% on the Ethereum Classic chain. And if you actually look in the blockchain, there was a period where I was mining like all the blocks. You can see where I mined like 30 something in a row, and I was actually 100% of the Ethereum Classic hash power. So I don't know if the other guys dropped out or whatever, but I knew this would be extremely profitable because there was this app at the time called BitSquare, and they had this Ethereum Classic token listed. Do you remember this, Steve, when ETC started to be traded on BitSquare?
I think that was a little bit before my time. I think I joined just after the rename to Bisque.
Right. So basically, my experience at the time was you download this app, and it syncs up to the network, and it showed me that the price discovery at the time was like $1. And I was mining like half of all the Ethereum Classic at the time. So, with my electricity bill, this was like a no-brainer for my profitability. So I cranked up all my miners, all my GPUs to like 120%. I'm telling all my guys, go to the Fry's and buy all the GPUs you can. Like, we're going to just mine the hell out of this ETC thing. And we mined something like 26,000 Ethereum Classic in 3 days.
Holy shit.
And then it got listed on Poloniex at like $2, and then it went to like $4 or $5, and we were like, oh my God, this is like the best call ever, right? Like, all the investors are like opening the champagne, and they were really happy. Then I think it went up to like $40 at the peak. So if the investors kept it and held it and traded it properly, that was probably like $1 million decision to reject censorship.
So like the key there was when the fork happened, all the exchanges went in line with the Ethereum Foundation, Vitalik and stuff. So none of them were listing the original chain to begin with, right? And you had to use something like BitSquare or Bisque, which later became
big running beef I have with Coinbase is that they took like a year and a half to release the Ethereum Classic.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Over 99% of the mining hash power and literally all the exchanges went along with Vitalik. And the only exchange was BitSquare that was trading the ETC token, and then Poloniex started trading it, and then it was like, oh my God, all the users were demanding their exchanges to give them the ETC that was now obviously very valuable.
Yeah, and I think you glossed over something there. Slight detail. You said they followed Vitalik. Vitalik literally hopped in the chat room and told the exchanges to stop trading.
Oh yeah. If that's not centralization,
Is Ethereum sufficiently decentralized now today?
Oh yeah, for sure. Garens Bond Barons. Put all your money in Ethereum. In fact, isn't Udi like one of their best developer advocates now?
Apparently, yes. He's a big Ethereum shill these days.
No, he's full on Tron now.
Oh, he's shifted over?
Yeah.
All right, guys. It's Tron now.
Tron is Ethereum 3.0.
Yeah.
According to Udi.
Oh, straight to 3.0. We're not even going to get 2.0.
You know, who needs 2.0?
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting. Like, it's funny because they just changed their difficulty bomb again. Like,
Oh yeah, just when's Casper coming again? What was that? A proof of stake they've been working on for 5-6 years now.
I have a long thread documenting the pushbacks of the Ethereum roadmap. It's the reverse Lindy. The longer you wait, the longer you will be expected to wait for proof of stake. Just keep that in mind, Ethereans. So this event led you to Bisq, right? This is what Bisq.
Well, that was my first experience with Bisq. Yeah, I actually didn't use it after that until a few months, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. I started getting involved in Bisq again. Steve, how did you get involved with Bisq?
I think it was a tweet. I think I remember seeing a tweet about documentation, and I guess I've been into writing and was wanting that kind of a roller to do that kind of work. And when I had been introduced to Bisq a couple of months before the tweet, and so I had my eye on the project, and I liked what they were doing. And when this opportunity came up to write documentation for the project, I just thought maybe I would give it a try, and got to talk to some people in the project, got to see more about how what they were trying to achieve, how the work was actually getting done, the community, and just got more and more into it.
When was this exactly?
I found out about the project at the end of 2017, and then I made my first contribution in early 2018.
All right. So I think this is a good segue into 724. Mark it down. We're going to edit it later. Sorry, there was some feedback in the air. I just heard it here.
Yeah.
This is a good point to give the not the marketing pitch, but like obviously you use Bisq to create an Ethereum Classic market back in the day. How has the experience changed since then? What is the ethos, and what is the current state today?
So I guess the ethos is, at least the way I think of it as the game changer, in my opinion, is that Bisq is taking what traditionally is a company that provides a service and has turned it into software, a network. The common kind of phrase, the way we conceptualize it is if Bitcoin gives you the ability to be your own bank, Bisq gives you the ability to be your own exchange. You're a node on an exchange network where you can trade Bitcoin for fiat currencies and other cryptocurrencies. And so, this is software. It's open source, free software that you can download, build yourself, audit it yourself from top to bottom, run it. And, the software itself is a hidden service. So everything goes over Tor, all data goes over Tor. There are no accounts, user accounts, emails, nothing required. It's just your node. You can connect it to your full node, of course, and go to town, trade Bitcoin.
I think the biggest thing for me is the incentives. When you have a company, they eventually all pretty much turn out to be evil, right? Even Google started out as this tiny little startup when we were not going to be an evil, and they turn into this huge conglomerate where they're monetizing users' private data as much as they can. And it's simply because the incentives or the interests of the shareholders do not align with the interest of the users. In fact, they're like exact opposites in a lot of cases. But in the case of Bisq, it's a community of individuals, just like Bitcoin. And I'm very bullish on this community of individuals concept because everyone's aligns are everyone's interests are perfectly aligned. We're all incentivized to build and collaborate on this, kind of like Wikipedia or any of these Creative Commons types of projects. They're just pure success, right? And it's like the first model where you can just remove all the corporate compliance department, There's a lot of government regulations. Just we're not affected by any of this simply because we're individuals running software, whereas every other centralized exchange out there would have to comply because they're a company and they have to be evil, not necessarily because they want to, but because the government is going to force them to. And I think a perfect example is like Shapeshift. They started out as this no KYC was like their whole value add. Right. And sure enough, government puts the gun to their head. They now require mandatory full KYC. And so the way that Bisq maintains its financial self-sovereignty is by not being a company, by being a community of individuals that just collaborate to an open source project where there are no servers, there's no central point of failure. As much as we can, we're always trying to improve the software to make it more censorship resistant.
Yeah, and there's almost, I think, you could say kind of like a reverse pressure, like because it's an open source code base and not a company that has everything just kind of locked behind in a black box. If the project were to make a misstep, it would just get forked. So it's like this pressure that, okay, this project is about privacy, security, and freedom, and if it doesn't stick to that, it's going to be over. It's going to be forked.
Yeah. So one thing we talk a lot about on this podcast, what you just alluded to with Shapeshift, is these shitcoin casinos get a lot of liquidity, market themselves as the no KYC, no AML place to trade. Binance is a perfect example. Most recently, they blew up in 2017 and this year strapped KYC AML on everybody, particularly Americans. Now, and not even particularly everybody, they had a big data dump with people's passports and selfies.
Yep.
That's not good. We don't want that. And so I guess, where do we want to go with this? Before we get into the problems historically that Bisq has with liquidity and UX and bootstrapping a network effect, let's get into the idiocy of KYC AML and why collecting all this data is stupid.
Steve, do you want to take this one? I mean, where do you even begin?
Oh, I guess why do it? I think the case that's being made traditionally is that it's for your safety. We don't want you to be trading with bad people. We don't want you to be scammed by other people. We want to keep people safe. And
think about the children. What about the terrorists?
Right. Exactly.
You need to get all your private data for this.
But I think the foundational reason and the reason that the approach that Bisq takes is it's not really about that. It shouldn't really be about identity. It should be more about integrity. So verifying integrity as opposed to verifying identity. So on Bisq, we just recently implemented account signing with the most major recent release. And the idea there is that there were some bank account scammers over the past few months ago where people were using stolen bank accounts to buy Bitcoin on Bisq because there were no checks. You pretty much put your bank account information in the software and take a trade or take an offer to buy Bitcoin, buy the Bitcoin, and then turn around and just do a charge. The person who rightfully owned the account would see this charge and then do a chargeback, and the other person would be scammed. So the approach that we've taken to fix that is to devise a way for a bank account owner to prove that they actually own the account. So not submit a passport, not submit whatever video proof or blood sample, whatever it is these people are doing these days. Just do a trade.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see blood samples in the future.
I think Edward Snowden originally made that joke somewhere. But just do a trade. Prove that you actually own this account. Do a successful trade where there isn't a chargeback, and you're probably good. And we have other methods coming to verify.
But who do you do that first trade with?
You would do that first trade with a person who has already been signed. So signed accounts have higher trade limits than people who have unsigned accounts.
So you keep them below a threshold, basically, until they're...
Yeah, so you're limited to 0.01 Bitcoin.
It's like a reputation system.
Kind of.
Well, I think I would kind of disagree with it. It's more of a security vulnerability mitigation mechanism. The reputation system, we can talk about that in a bit, but in this case, the way it works technically is you take your bank account information and you make like a cryptographic digest. It's like a SHA-256 hash of it. So nobody can see what your bank account number is, but the hash of it is now locked in, and this gets stored in everybody's Bisq nodes. And after they see that this data has been on their node for more than 1 month, and this same account is still around, they know, well, if he was a scammer, he probably would have got the account closed within a they would have figured it out.
So he's using the same bank account.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to say. 'Cause this could be the way I envision it. Could be gamed as somebody just is a good actor in the beginning and then scams people after they get verified.
Yeah, but if you do some chargebacks, they're going to figure it out and they're going to close the account within 1 month.
Like that's fraud.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
you have normal.
Yeah, so, and again, this is only for very insecure payment methods, right? Like, I live in Japan, and, well, Japanese bank transfers don't allow chargebacks because that's a stupid idea.
Really?
I mean, like, I really honestly don't understand how American or even European banks you can just call them up and be like, oh yeah, my account got hacked, and they'll like reverse all the charges. Again, it's going back to the Ethereum thing, but if you're like a merchant and, you ship the goods thinking that you have the money, and then the bank takes it out of your account, like PayPal and other insecure guys, they do this, right? It's how can you even have a business, right? They put the pressure on the merchant to almost vet the customers to make sure that they're not scammers or something, right? Which you can't do in a lot of cases. There's like these high risk credit card payment processors, and it's like this whole other industry for that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, the account signing is it's more of a security for insecure payment methods, trying to make them like a little bit more secure by adding this time delay thing. I don't know if you want to talk about the bonded reputation. This is kind of a feature in Bisq we haven't used widely so yet, but we're going to add it very soon. The way it works is, all right, I want to be a market maker. I want to do trading on Bisq as like my full-time thing. And so in order for people to see that I'm not just some random scammer, I'm going to lock up a whole bunch of money in the Bisq network itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to modify the app to have like a score. So if the guy has no money bonded, it's called like a bond, right? So if you do something bad, if you scam people, say I trade with Steve and I scam him, but I have a bond, he can go to the Bisq, decentralized organization and say, you should confiscate this guy's bond because he scammed me. And then you have this very decentralized way of, enforcing that.
Why am I thinking that Adam Gibson was working on something similar to this? Like a bond for like a CoinJoin network too. I don't know. But no, it seems very interesting, right?
Well, I mean, that's how things work in like a crypto anarchy system, right? If everybody has perfect privacy, you have to assume that everyone are like scammers. And so the only way you can kind of steer people into the right thing, just like Bitcoin, you have to financially incentivize good behavior and financially disincentivize the bad behavior. So scammers aren't going to put money out of their own pocket and risk losing it just to, scam like little trades here and there. They're going to go after some other lower hanging fruit. And that's what the bond system, I think, really should. It just prevents all scams, basically, when you have to put the security deposit.
And the security deposit, the hard part here is interacting with fiat, right? So like the security deposit, that's I'm assuming in Bitcoin, right?
Yes.
And like a multi-sig or something like that?
Yes, there's security deposit on each trade, which you configure how many % you want to do. And then there's this bonded reputation kind of system where you can lock up a certain amount of money for like 1 month or 3 months or 6 months, whatever time period you want to do. And then that also like influence your quote unquote reputation score, which we're still implementing right now. And Steve, you want to explain like how the whole trade process works? Because I think you're really good at explaining that.
I usually trip over myself in trying to do that, but sure. So essentially I guess it's important to first outline that there is no like order matching on Bisq. There is no real single order book. What you see in the software when you open it is a collection of offers from other people's nodes who are online at the moment, which is kind of the basis of the peer-to-peer network. Every node hosts its own offers and has its own payment accounts. When you want to take an offer on Bisq, you send a Bitcoin deposit. Usually it's about, I think, 10 or 20% of the full trade amount to a multi-sig address. And the other person, the offer maker, will do the same. And once that transaction hits one confirmation, the buyer is told to send the money, acknowledge that they've done so in Bisq once they have. And then once the seller receives the payment, they'll acknowledge that they've received the payment in Bisq, and at that point, deposits and the trade, the Bitcoin amount are routed to the buyer and the seller appropriately.
Yeah, this is a really secure system because for the two trade counterparties to enter into a trade at all, to even begin, they would both have to have their funds in the multi-sig escrow with at least one blockchain confirmation. So if for some reason the multi-sig escrow doesn't get confirmed, maybe there was like an attacker trying to do some invalid thing, then you could never risk losing any of your funds because the funds would never leave your wallet, right? It either goes into the escrow or it stays in your wallet. It's either all or nothing. That's the beauty of a multi-sig escrow on-chain transaction, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, once they have the funds in the multi-sig, you just got to deal with the fiat stuff. And as long as you can mitigate the security on that, you can make this really smooth trade process.
So I just really quick, I think it's important to mention for folks who are not familiar with Bisq that all non-Bitcoin transactions or transfers happen off of Bisq. So when you're sending US dollars or euros or whatever, you're sending it through your bank or through another payment app or whatever, and then just acknowledging that you've done so or received in Bisq.
So what is, from the user's perspective, what does their bank think they're doing? Just sending money to somebody, a friend, they assume is a friend or something like that?
Yeah.
Depends on the payment method, right? Like Japanese bank transfer actually respects the user's privacy, so they don't ask what the bank transfer is for. In some countries, like real totalitarian societies, like when you do a bank wire in like USA or Europe, no, really, like they ask like what are the funds for?
Yeah, I think Japan is an anomaly here. I mean, most places you have like a reason for payment.
They like strip search you.
Dude, I've had my bank text me, shut down my card and text me like 3 times in the last month because I've tried to use my card somewhere, and they're like, "We think this is suspicious." I'm like, "No."
Yeah, I mean, they
like
pretty
using
much.
my card.
Yeah, if they suspect you for any reason, they'll, I think usually what we require is, or whenever possible, for users to put in a trade, like a string, a random alphanumeric string that corresponds with the trade. And I think some payment processors seem to have maybe caught on to that and kind of regard that as suspicious, but for the most part, they don't say anything.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be careful on Venmo, right? You can't even say like the word Iran without getting shut down.
How does the escrow arbitration work? Like who's controlling the other keys there in the multi-sig besides the two parties?
So right now with the launch of the most recent version 1.2, it's just the traders. It's a 2 of 2 multi-sig.
Got it.
It used to be 2 of 3, where an arbitrator had a third key, but now it's just the traders, and dispute resolution has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, Bisq had this. It's kind of, we should maybe do a little background on the DAO, but basically before the Bisq DAO was launched, there was a 2 of 3 multi-sig escrow where an arbitrator had a third key and he could resolve a dispute between the two parties. But obviously this is a trusted third party and a central point of failure. And, we had to get rid of the arbitrator. So now that the Bisq DAO is online and functioning healthy, what we did was we removed the arbitrators, and now we have mediators only, which have no power. It's a 2 of 2 multi-sig between the two trade parties. So all the mediator can really do is help the newbies when they make a mistake. And this is actually the majority of issues. Like the actual rate of scamming is very, very low. It's just people who had a bug, or they screwed up their wallet, or they pressed the wrong button, or something like this. And the mediator can resolve most of these disputes. But if the mediator cannot resolve disputes, like if the other person just disappears, which does kind of happen rarely, because they have their money in the security deposit. So
why would they disappear?
Right? Why would they disappear? Who knows? But they're going to risk losing their security deposit if they disappear. So there's this time lock transaction where I think it's 10 days for crypto and 20 days for fiat. Yeah. Where if the trade is not resolved in this much time after it enters the multi-sig escrow, it'll essentially go to this, how do you say, like...
donation address.
Yeah, donation address. It's kind of like not the right word for it. But basically, but it works because the money will get donated to the Bisq DAO donation address. But what happens is you have this kind of like the role formerly known as arbitrator. Maybe you can call him the underwriter now or something, the refund agent, where he'll just buy the trader's claim. So... 20 days after this trade fails, you're going to get your money back from the arbitrator. He's going to buy your claim.
So secondary market's already forming.
Right, but at 100%. So you get fully cashed out. And then this underwriter guy is going to go to the Bisq DAO and ask for a reimbursement for the money that got donated to that donation address. And so he's not a party of your trade at all, but if you do have a dispute with this trade party, he will buy you out 100%, and then he'll settle it with the DAO on his own time. And
So at least the deposit isn't locked forever.
Right.
Right. That's basically what it's.
Yeah, because otherwise, if someone's computer just blew up or something and they weren't able to complete the trade, then this would be the ultimate way of resolving it. But this way, we're also like Bisq is even that Bisq underwriter guy. He's never a party to a trade, right? It's just totally between those two people. Unless it fails, he can buy the claim and recover the funds.
I think it's important to point out that the back end might sound a little complex and confusing for a new user, but for a user, it's largely the same as before. You're working with a mediator, and that mediator is going to give you a suggested payout. It's a button. Do I take it or not? If you take it, trade's over, and you get your funds. If not, then you request arbitration, and the arbitrator will just pay you Bitcoin.
Right.
That's it. You don't have to worry about the DAO or reimbursement.
I think we need to change the terminology on that, because it's not arbitration
Or,
anymore.
yeah.
It was just to not confuse the users. But yeah, we got to change it to underwriter or refund agent
or something.
Yeah. What type of users are becoming arbiters? Like, are people seeing this as something that could be profitable into the future?
I think one day it could be.
Yeah.
We're coming from a time when arbitrators were highly trusted roles, and so and also I don't think we have a need for more arbitrators or more refund agents at the moment.
Right.
But as volume grows and as the network grows in other countries and other regions, and we have a need for more languages, then we'll probably have a marketplace develop for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so let's jump into the clunky side of it, or not the clunky side, but Bisq has been around for a while, and it's competing with centralized exchanges that make it very easy to buy Bitcoin. What's it been like trying to bootstrap this network effect and get it into more people's hands?
Probably been I'd call it a long, slow process.
Yeah.
It's I mean it's still like you can if you open the software, if you open the program at a bad time in your region, you might not see too many offers. And I think a lot of people get scared away by this, but the one thing that folks should know, I think, is that there are a lot of lurkers. And if you make an offer, I mean, you'll probably get it taken pretty quickly.
That's the thing. Nobody really wants to be the maker, right? Everybody wants to be the taker. But yeah, there's a few issues, right? Anytime you have a decentralized system, the UX always suffers as a result. It's going to be slower than a centralized system. Your credit card's always going to be faster than meeting someone in Starbucks and exchanging cash or something like this, right? And not only does UX suffer, but you have less liquidity, right? Because you go on a centralized exchange, there's a bazillion offers, the market very deep in both ways. Whereas on a local trading pair like in Japan, we might only have a few offers on the offer book at any time. So you just gotta. Everyone wants to be the taker. They want the instant result. Like, I want to sell Bitcoin now. Let me go to the offers, and they'll usually take an offer. So this creates a market maker opportunity, right?
It kind of reminds me of Bitcoin in that there's really no reason to use Bitcoin until you have no other option, right? And then all of a sudden you really realize the value of Bitcoin, right? And with Bisq, it's a similar idea. Like, if you have a way to get Bitcoin without KYC, quicker, centralized, you'll do it. But as we see KYC get implemented, throughout the world, we saw local Bitcoins add KYC. Then people come to Bisq because that is their only option, right?
That's the only option for a lot of people. For example, in Japan, the centralized exchanges are only allowed to trade a few coins that the government has whitelisted, and they don't want to whitelist Monero because it has privacy. So for some things, like if you want to trade Monero in Japan, your only option is Bisq, even in a free country like Japan. So it's already the only option. Or like me with the Ethereum Classic story earlier, before any centralized exchange listed it, BitSquare was the first.
Yeah, I mean, it works even better with altcoins, right? Because the fiat ramp is a major pain point in general.
I'm not a huge fan of the altcoins. I'm always been more maximalist guy.
But in terms of actual cryptographic enforcement and whatnot.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the easiest to prove a trade dispute. You either sent the money or you're not. Here's the blockchain block explorer link, right? It's the fiat stuff that's always a pain in the butt. But you can work around that. There's different payment methods that we support. We try to do something more creative with gift cards or something like this. That would be really cool if we figure this out. So,
is there any stablecoin integration? Is there any like Tether?
We had Tether, but nobody traded it, so I think it got delisted.
Yeah, there were I think 2 or 3, but I don't think there was any volume on them.
Matt, you mentioned local Bitcoins out in KYC. Did you guys see like an influx of users after that?
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of the reasons why I joined the project. Like it probably was like 5 months ago. So in Japan, in Tokyo, our local Bitcoin community, we have a really cool meetup group of cypherpunk people, and we actually just use local Bitcoins as like a Excel sheet. We didn't actually use the custodial escrow because nobody wanted to trust local Bitcoins. And there's no real crime in Tokyo, so you can just meet someone in a Starbucks, exchange thousands of dollars, never have any issue.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's just...
Sitting here in New York City, it's like...
Yeah, in New York City, yeah. Quite the difference. But local Bitcoin shut down the face-to-face cash offer book. And so we lost our Excel spreadsheet. So I actually went to Bisq and I was like, we actually just want like a decentralized Excel sheet if we could just have that offer book. And if you look at the JPY offer book now, there's some guys doing that where they put like a 1 yen buy offer and then they put a note that says, just email me with, because they don't want to use the security escrow features of Bisq. They don't want to pay the trading fees. And that's fine too, right? It's like, it's a censorship resistant, like how is the government like going to censor this message, right?
Well, that's a big assumption we've been making on this podcast, that people will meet on local Bitcoins or something like Bisq once or twice and just have that connect and use them directly. Is that something that you've seen in your...
So I have a lot of friends who are market makers on Bisq actually, and they generally want to keep trading. If they meet someone on Bisq, they generally want to keep trading on Bisq, even if they kind of trust each other a little bit, just because all the security mitigations are in place. Like, maybe we do a lot of business together, but why would I want to just stop using multi-sig escrow, which guarantees my security in the case that you screw me over, right? It's like the risk-benefit analysis is like, I guess we could save maybe $1 on the trading fee, but I would lose all my protections, right?
Don't trust, verify, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do we see this moving forward? Like, are you guys bullish on Bisq right now? You got the DAO. So let's talk about the DAO. You got the DAO token, and this is basically trying to incentivize people to build stuff out, correct? Bounties and...
That's part of it. I would say it's a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah.
The DAO, I think, is a big reason that I've been so fascinated by the project.
And let's preface this. This is a DAO. Is this a shitcoin? Is this...
Let's talk about the token.
Colored Bitcoin is how we've kind of preferred to refer to it lately.
Yeah, there was no ICO or anything
Right.
like this. And to use Bisq, you don't need to use the BSQ. It's actually mostly for the contributors to use internally. But the way I like to explain it is that when you pay your trading fees, you can choose to pay them in Bitcoin or you can choose to pay them in BSQ. And if you pay with BSQ, then this BSQ just gets decolored back into normal Satoshis. And so you're burning this BSQ from the supply. And the only way BSQ gets issued is by the contributors, because there's no Bisq company to do some Bisq ICO scam. It's just the contributors. Say if I implemented like dark mode into the app or something like this, maybe I get like a few thousand BSQ. And now I can go on the Bisq exchange and sell my BSQ to the customers, the users, the traders, and get Bitcoin to pay my rent or my other living expenses, and they're going to use that to pay their trading fees. So it's this very cool like closed loop economy where the users' trading fees are directly going to pay the contributors' living expenses.
But who issues that BSQ to the contributor who created dark mode? Or whatever?
So it's a colored Bitcoin. So I'm taking my own Bitcoin, my own Satoshis, and I'm creating a proposal in our DAO governance system. And if Steve approves my compensation request, my Satoshis will be colored into BSQ. And so they only exist on the Bitcoin blockchain, and they're just sats, but they're in a different wallet now. And I can trade this BSQ to somebody else who has the same BSQ colored Bitcoin wallet, and it's built into the Bisq.
Right. So I guess my question is, who approves that proposal?
The DAO, everybody. It's a vote.
It's like there's a voting system.
Right. You want to explain that, Steve?
Yeah, so it's a you can think of it like a voting system where so that for example the proposal kind of thing that Wiz just mentioned is a Bitcoin transaction. You would ask for, say, I did this much work this month and I think I deserve this much in BSQ compensation. You would make a proposal transaction with that request along with the sats that you would need to produce that quantity of BSQ. And then in the voting, the next round, the next phase of the process is a voting cycle where each person in the community who wants to vote will go through the lists of proposals that were made in that cycle and yay or nay, accept or reject each one.
And that's weighted based on how much BSQ they have? Is that how that works?
There's a little bit more to it, but yeah, pretty much how much you have and how much you've earned. And earned BSQ is worth a little bit more than bought BSQ to prevent against whales from coming in and just...
So contributors have more of a vote, basically.
Yeah.
Skin in the game, right? Makes
Skin
sense.
in the game, exactly.
Yeah. So do you see this evolving like beyond cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, you could take the DAO model and apply it to other open source projects, right? Because I guess the critical component is that Bisq is its own exchange, so it can trade its own colored Bitcoin token on itself, which is probably a really critical point. But you could take your open source project, and for everybody who contributes to your open source project, you issue them a token. And then, you have to have this closed loop economy somehow. So they have to have some way of like burning or redeeming the token for something else, right? For example, with BTC Pay Server, maybe they could, they have a foundation now. So in theory, they could make like a DAO that colors some Bitcoins to the contributors. And then for the users, if they want to donate, they could just buy these tokens from the contributors and burn them. And then that would be, directly sending the contributors money based on how much they contributed.
That's what I think is really cool about the mechanism. Like, it goes back to what Wiz was saying earlier about companies and how their incentive structures are often flawed, especially when you get to a really big scale. With the Bisq DAO, the entire project is responsible to its users, and the DAO constantly enforces that. It doesn't have a set of investors that it needs to please just for the sake of making another dollar. It has a set of principles that the users use the software for. And the whole DAO incentive structure just enforces that and requires the software just to become better in those particular respects.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a shame, too, because the ICO boom, the DAO in particular, sort of...
the Slockit DAO?
Yeah, leaves a shit stain on the concept of a DAO.
For sure, yeah.
It scares a lot of people away from
It's like the first companies. I just think of a DAO as a kind of a structure. Like the first companies, there were a lot of really bad companies that started out. And if we looked at companies then as this evil thing that could never be done in a different way, could never be done better, then we wouldn't have the companies that we have today and the progress that we have today. So I think, there were certainly missteps with DAOs.
I think even the Ethereum Foundation pointed out a lot of fundamental flaws in the financial economics of the Slockit DAO. Like they basically said, there's no way, even if the DAO were to somehow invest in a project that made some profits or some returns, there was no way to funnel those returns back to the investor. It was just a scam. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone lost their money, right? And
how much did they raise? Like $150 million for fucking automated locks?
And it didn't even work. And it was, security vulnerabilities. Like literally the guy was like, oh no, that we're totally not.
Steven the tool.
Yeah, we're not vulnerable to this. And then sure enough, next week, actually, we lost all the money.
We're going to need you to stop trading, please. So do you think we will, we obviously are trying to flesh out a DAO here with Bisq. Do you see Bisq DAO model as something that could sort of save the image of DAOs in particular?
Well, it's profitable, right? Like the Bisq DAO is profitable in the sense that if it issues 50,000 BSQ each month, and the traders are burning 50,000 BSQ each month, it's like an actual profitable business. This is sustainable. It's not like one of these ICO scams where they just sell millions of dollars worth of tokens and then deliver nothing and promise the world,
Well, the key here is I feel like exchange tokens are one of the few things that have very straightforward utility, right? So you actually pay you can pay fees with the BSQ token. So it's very easy to put it in a circular like create like a little circular economy there.
Maybe.
You could. I guess I don't know of any other exchange tokens
think
that
that-
have this kind of cycle.
So, what do you guys think about BNB and Leo?
Well, no, but that's it's like apples and oranges, right? Because
Yeah.
they're doing ICO. They have a company that's just printing the tokens
Right.
like by the billions or whatever. They have market maker trading bots. This is like Bisq is really peer to peer. You're literally buying the tokens directly
Right.
from the contributor.
And also, there's a loop. Like I think, from what I know about BNB, it's like the token was issued, and like you can use it to pay fees, and you can use it to do other things. Supposedly, maybe use.
I saw you could buy champagne in a club in Vegas.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Vegas clubs are accepting BNB.
but like ultimately, what's the use case for it? It's not really benefiting the Binance company.
Line CZ's pockets.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. It's like faux equity or whatever.
Right, but
It's
with
not
Bisq,
really-
there's actually an other side where it's actually funding the project. There is
Right.
no other source of capital. There's nothing else. It's
That's true.
The BSQ token.
But the key there, the obviously is completely different than BNB or Leo. But the key is that utility of the fees, right? That's what I'm trying to say. It's like one of these things is like everyone kept talking about utility tokens, and really at the end of the day, no one has any incentive to hold these tokens, right? But with BSQ, there's like a real usage of it, right? Because you can pay the fees.
It's actually very like the economics of BSQ are actually really complex, and so for example, if you pay your trading fees in Bitcoin, they essentially go to this what might as well just be a trading bot that takes the Bitcoin and buys BSQ off the market and just burns it in a cryptographically provable way. And this, in a way, this actually combines the utility token purpose of BSQ for the trading fees with the kind of like the shares or ownership is the wrong word, but the stakeholders of the BSQ. And these are the people who are essentially investing in the Bisq project. Because if you want to invest in Bisq, you could just buy BSQ and hold it. And because of this closed loop system, as I mentioned before, like if you're issuing 50,000 BSQ, but Bisq gets really popular and the trading volume goes up by 10x, and now the traders are burning 500,000 BSQ just because there's 10x more trading volume. Well, now there's a huge demand for BSQ, and that's going to make the users, maybe some of them are going to pay it in Bitcoin now, or the DAO has to adjust the trading fees in BSQ to go down to kind of balance it out. But at the end of the day, these profits will be realized by the price of BSQ going up. And for the contributors who are holding BSQ, it's kind of like getting sweat equity in a way. And if you want to invest in Bisq, you can do this. So it has the utility token purpose. It has this stakeholder purpose. It has this voting governance purpose.
Bonding. Yeah.
Whereas BNB is just shitcoin.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, BNB is just a shitcoin. But it's crazy how so I guess what we should hop in here too is like the cypherpunk values versus the make as much money as possible values, which a lot of these exchanges exude, right? Like,
Yeah.
And so we have a path. Like I've been saying this a lot on this podcast. I believe we have a path, and we have two paths to choose from. Like we either have the Chinese surveillance state exported to the rest of the world. Like we were just talking about a Rabbit Hole recap here in New York. They're talking about facial recognition in the subway system, and stuff like that. And then we can do that or go towards the Bisq completely decentralized. But it's going to be harder, right? Like, so how do we incentivize people to go to hard route?
Well, first of all, we have to improve the UX because right now you have to run it on a desktop computer or laptop, and it has to be running like 24 hours. Basically like a Bitcoin node or a Lightning node. Actually, Lightning is a really good analogy for Bisq because they're both built on top of Bitcoin, and they both use Bitcoin as like this layer 1 thing, and Lightning and the Bisq network are both kind of like layer 2. And instead of payment channels, you have like trade channels, which are these multi-sig escrow, and you also have time locks and all these things. So there's a lot of similarities. But I don't know, what do you think, Steve? Like how do we make it? Because I think the mobile app is probably the coolest way. So this is one thing that I'm really pushing for in the Bisq project now, is that I figured out this architecture where we can make Bisq run on an Android phone. It's kind of technical details, but long story short, I want to be able to have a Bitcoin meetup in a bar and say, okay, guys, install this app on your phone and just be up and running on Bisq like right away. And I feel that's a good way to probably increase the user base by 5x or 10x, hopefully.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I agree with that. That UX is a huge part of it, both in terms of availability and platforms. And yeah,
I'm sorry, I'll let you finish. Then I got a question.
sure. Oh, I was just gonna add that also in terms of the UX and the software. Like I know a lot of people, surprisingly, a lot of people have heard about Bisq and they've downloaded Bisq, who I've spoken to, but they've never actually used it. They open it and they're just immediately like,
What the fuck?
brain.
Yeah.
It's a little overwhelming.
It's a little overwhelming, and I've seen some mock-ups from our designer for an overhaul of the UX that guides people when they open the software for the first time, step by step. What do I do now? What's the first thing? How do you create a payment account? How do I make an offer? And just guide them step by step. Things like that. I think making the key actions more obvious.
Well, what I'm really trying to get at here is so even if the UX does improve, will it ever get to the point where it's on par with these centralized exchanges? And if not, how do we convince people to take the harder route, right?
I think a lot of that's just going to be automatic. Like you're just going to need to. You're just not going to want to put up with whatever the centralized.
Well, you don't even have
exchanges
an
are.
option. It's your only option.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to go to China right now, they have these really strict capital controls. And I heard that the reason why they're making their own cryptocurrency is so that they can basically censor Bitcoin and the others, force the user. I mean, the same thing they did with the internet, right? They want to force people to use their government-controlled cryptocurrency so that they can enforce their capital controls on this cryptocurrency as well.
Yeah, China just announced their selective anonymity in their government
Double
chain?
speak.
Yeah.
They have like a honey and stick approach where they ban something and then they give you like
Right.
a good enough alternative. They have all the Google, the
WeChat.
Google
Yeah.
competitors and stuff, WeChat, Weibo. And so they give you some kind of tool that you can use and people just use it out of convenience.
Well, you get all the benefits of that centralized UX and all the totalitarianism of the Chinese government to, social credit score. And even in the USA,
It's trending towards that here.
oh yeah, try to rent a hotel room or a car without a credit card, and try getting a credit card without a credit score. It's not a social credit score, but
It's a slippery slope towards
it's
that.
a slippery slope, right? It's like in the Bitcoin world, these concepts just don't exist, right? In the Bisq world, your identity is just this string of letters and onion address, right? Like, if you have perfect privacy, it's pretty easy to have perfect freedom because nobody knows who you are, nobody knows what you're doing, and they just can't regulate you, right?
So we talked about some of the pain points of UX, but I think one of the cool parts of Bisq, which I want to see go to more software in this space, is that it's got Tor bundled in. So you boot it up, it's an actual node in the network, it's connecting P2P through Tor, and then when you have an update, that update not only gets delivered to you through Tor, but the previous software you installed then verifies the PGP signature for you, since almost nobody is verifying these signatures. So at least if you have the previous software and the previous software wasn't malicious, that the next update you get is a legitimate update. I think that's really fucking cool.
Yeah, Bisq is written by cypherpunks for cypherpunks, but we try to make the UX nice enough so that even newbies can use it.
How many people are contributing right now?
Not enough.
That's the easy answer. I mean, I guess you could say consistent contributors, probably 15 to 20.
Really?
Might be my
Yeah.
guess. Well, there are a lot more people, but just consistently about that much.
There's some people doing like translations
Yeah.
or like kind of lesser roles, but then the core developer team is quite small.
What's the stack look like?
Right now, it's this Java JVM thing we got. The original founder of the project was like a Java guy, so he's not really active these days. He's just probably pretty much totally out of it, actually. But we're still maintaining the Java code base, and it took Bisq like 5 years to get to this point, right? Bisq is not new. Just to get to
It's
one
been
point.
around for a minute.
Yeah, I mean it launched so it was in development since 5 years ago. It launched 3 years ago, and then the DAO launched about 7 months ago.
Yeah, April.
Yeah, 8 months ago. So if you figure that it took 5 years just to get to this V1.2, where we're just able now to do like trading in this decentralized way, even with all the pain points, like we did a feasibility study to kind of re-implement the code, and at the end of the day, we realized you know, it was a hard decision, but we came back and said, yeah, let's keep working with the Java app for now. I think probably when we do like the V2 trade protocol, which is a whole discussion in itself, you know, basically we try to get rid of the on-chain transactions entirely at that point. Well, because eventually the Bitcoin blocks will get full and we'll have to, you know, Lightning has a similar issue, right? Where if you have to pay $100 fee to open a channel with someone, then, you know.
Yeah. So how are you guys preparing for this?
Everybody would be bonded basically, and there would be no security deposits and no on-chain multi-sig escrow. That's the short summary, but easier said than done.
Yeah. No. So let's jump into the fee debate. We actually just talked about that as well in the podcast we just recorded. Like, are you worried? Do you think a fee market will develop?
Well, it has to. I mean, Satoshi intentionally built this into the protocol. This is how the miners get compensated after the block subsidy goes down.
But will people pay the fees?
Of course they will.
Will it happen? There's a lot of FUD out there.
Yeah, let them FUD.
Yeah. So what gives you this confidence? Just because you've been around for a while, the fact that you've mined for so long?
when Bitmain and Wujihan were intentionally spamming the Bitcoin blockchain with their own high fee transactions because they were 50% of the hash rate and they were getting half of those high fees back, users were still using Bitcoin. And they didn't fall for the Bcash FUD, you know? They didn't fall for Bcash is the real Bitcoin, like, propaganda, despite the millions of dollars of marketing backing it, right? Like, users are not dumb, especially when it comes to their own money. You know, maybe you can fool, like, half of a country's population into voting for a corrupt politician. But when it comes to, like, fooling cypherpunks with their hard-earned Satoshis, they're not so gullible, you know? They're gonna verify. They're not just gonna trust whatever you say. Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, the debate around the fee market developing in the future is intellectually masturbatory, in my opinion.
Well, it's not a debate. It's a science here. It's like, you know, this is like Bitcoin's like this peer-reviewed science. Debating is what politicians do, you know. This isn't like theory. It's already developing. You know?
There's another element here too, right? Because am I mistaken, or every Bisq transaction has an on-chain footprint, right? There's a privacy element.
Exactly. So that's another big advantage of the V2 protocol, which is still highly, you know, in discussion and not even conceptually solid at this point. But right, if you do the totally V2 off-chain trading protocol, you could just use Lightning to trade.
Right.
And then, you know, you would trade through the Lightning network and you would do some other fiat transaction on the side. And because you're both bonded, if there's any dispute, you can go to the refund agents or whatever that we decide to call them in the future, you know, in mediation, and you would still have this. So it's evolving slowly to kind of grow with Bitcoin or to kind of scale with it. But yeah, right now every Bisq trade is like 4 on-chain transactions, which is very inefficient and unoptimized. So, you know, we have a lot of work to do.
And you can tell it's a Bisq transaction, right? Like if you get Bitcoin, that Bitcoin on chain, you can see that it's from Bisq, right?
Is it like a vanity?
I mean, I'm sure there are some very evil blockchain analysis companies out there that have already identified the Bisq signature on the blockchain, and they're already indexing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to like blacklist Bitcoins that are traded through Bisq because, you know, we're somehow evil for protecting users' privacy, right? It's we got to improve the privacy, we got to improve the security, we got to improve the on-chain.
How funny is that? Evil for protecting privacy. That's how ass backwards it is today, right?
It really is. It really is.
Yeah. Let's get a little cosmic here. Like, why the fuck are people okay with not having privacy today?
Right. It's like, what if KYC is the illicit activity, right? Yes. Yeah. We talk about this a lot, and it's just they make up all this propaganda about why they have to know what you're doing, why they have to invade your privacy for security. But if we can implement security on top of Bitcoin with privacy, without sacrificing your privacy, then you can keep your freedom and avoid that entire banking system, the central banking system.
And the KYC isn't even effective because you can either get leaked, stolen KYC data, or you can buy it. There's like a whole market now where you could buy KYC data from like people in third world countries.
I got a notice like 2 months ago that SoulCycle leaked my data. I've never I've never even like.
Your confession, you were doing Soul Cycle for a while?
No, God no, I can't. I tore my ACL. I never got it fixed. I can't like stand up on those bikes.
Pay cash.
Yeah, pay cash, especially when you go to dinner with Bitcoiners. Yeah. So moving away from Bisq, like for a little bit here, like Wiz in particular, like, what are your thoughts on the current state of Bitcoin? Like you've been around for a while. You've seen a lot. Has Bitcoin exceeded your expectations, underperformed your expectations?
I think in our lifetimes, Bitcoin is probably the coolest thing that we could work on. Honestly, like in the previous generation, it was probably like the internet, or maybe even the beginning of the web was the coolest thing you could work on. But now the internet is basically like 100% of the world almost. Literally everyone has like a smartphone in their pocket connected to a high-speed network. Even the third world countries are really advancing with their mobile networks. And so we now can build the next layer. And there's all these, there's some apps on the internet already that were very successful, like communications. Nobody writes letters through the postal system anymore to communicate. We just text each other or whatever. And, Wikipedia for some kind of information exchange, or some kind of cat photos on Facebook or whatever people do. But now we have money as an app. And in a very secure way, in a very decentralized way, like the internet was designed to. And so, we can escape out of this fiat debt slavery, and we really push the human race forward.
What made you this way? What?
Born this way.
Were you like so? What were you into? Like what?
I dropped out of school at 14 to be a network engineer at this ISP startup, configuring like Cisco routers. I grew up working in the data center. Consulting for random people in Hawaii, where I'm from. And I moved to Japan when I was 20, and I was always the rebel. I never wanted to conform to any system or society or take a real job. I always wanted to be the freelancer or the entrepreneur. And once you get a taste of freedom, you can never go back to working for a 9-to-5 job, where you get your fiat paycheck and half the money's taken for taxes and all this other stuff. Yeah, once you get a taste of freedom with Bitcoin and Bisq, man, once you start trading on Bisq, like, you sign up for a centralized exchange, you're like, you want me to do what? ID selfie? You just delete the app, because once you get a taste of this better system, you look at the existing stuff, like, this is rubbish. Who's going to use this,
Yeah. And so that explains why you're able to build your own internet service provider. You grew up working.
Yeah, I mean, I've got gear in that data center that's like probably like 15, 20 years old. I got like a whole museum of old servers in there and new stuff too. Like Bisq has a few not trusted, but they have like data relay nodes where they're not trusted by the network, but they just relay encrypted and signed data without knowing what it is. There's like some seed nodes and stuff like this. Bitcoin has this too. Bitcoin has seed nodes, and so I run a few of those on my ISP, which is basically just for Bisq these days. And yeah, I mean, if you want to be censorship resistant, you can't host this kind of stuff on Google, right?
Do you see a breaking up of the ISP world at all in the future?
I don't know. There's not a huge need for that, because as long as you can run Tor, you can kind of run your own virtual ISP, right? Like, you don't need to register a domain name. You just create an onion address, which is just a cryptographic key. And, if your ISP is doing surveillance on you or censorship on you, well, yeah, just use a Tor or use some kind of VPN, which Tor is basically a decentralized VPN network. We don't have to trust people so much. I mean, there's not a huge need to build a new layer one when you can build this virtual layer one on top of a maybe slightly compromised layer one, right?
It's like Tails on top of the ISPs. Tor, like, yeah.
Yeah, you can do all kinds of cool stuff these days, right? Like, you can like put Tails on a USB stick and boot it up and do your secure stuff, and then go back to your probably backdoored NSA.
This thing.
Yeah, this MacBook you got right here. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, I mean, like, personally, I have like a pair of devices for everything. I have like the iPhone, which is, totally rooted by Apple, and I have some like Twitter and.
What are you talking about? They're all about privacy, man.
Right, just like the Apple credit card, right? Which is What a joke. It's just another credit card, right? I mean, they
It is actually crazy seeing all these big tech companies pivot towards becoming banking services as well.
We'll just announce checking accounts, right?
Yeah. Well, in their defense, like they should go further. They're able to outcompete the banks, like from an iterative UX process, and the banks are so beholden to regulations that they might as well go eat their lunch, right?
It's so weird. I have a bunch of friends who work at Google in Tokyo, and I was talking to them about Bitcoin stuff, and they don't understand why anyone would use Bitcoin because it's so slow and you have to wait 10 minutes for the confirmation. And I'm like, wow, you live in this like corporate bubble. Like you really don't understand that users don't want to have to trust Google with their security, privacy, and freedom. They want to, be able to verify their own open source software and just run it on their own hardware and have their money secured by their own private keys. Like this, once mainstream users start adopting this, they're not going to want it. The UX has to catch up, but once it gets there, it's going to be like a waterfall. Like everyone's just going to be like, oh, you're still running that centralized thing. It's like going to the post office, right?
Yeah, it feels like, another big topic on this podcast, like trying to put us, the people who are born in this day and age, in the context of a bigger history, right? I was born in the 90s. The internet was just coming up, and it feels like we're building out this digital infrastructure, which may take 5 to 7 decades. We're already how many decades in? And so do you see a point, or we're basically just building infrastructure and a new system that will be somewhat on cruise control at some point in our lives? And how does that change the world, if so?
Well, how long did it take for the early days of the internet or the ARPANET to get to like this 100% where everyone has the internet in their pocket? Probably like a good 30 plus years for all this infrastructure to be built. And, the internet still has tons of technical debt, like IPv4 addresses are, totally running out of the supply. And it'll probably take another 20, 30 years for everyone to make the switch to IPv6, right? For example.
Right.
And so there's all these kind of legacy things, and it always takes a long time. Once something's like good enough and kind of working, this is the problem with the banking system, right? Is that people don't see it. The funny thing is, you go to like Venezuela or Zimbabwe, it's like common knowledge. It's like obvious to them why you would never use the fiat currency, right? But if you go to like other countries, like, oh no, we love our fiat currency. We think it's the coolest thing ever. And like Japan is an extremely challenging market to try and advocate for Bitcoin or Bisq, right? Because in Japan, the banks are so efficient. Like literally, I can transfer money from my bank account to Bitflyer like less than 5 minutes, do a trade, and get the Bitcoin in my wallet like another 5 minutes later. It's like, round trip trade time, like less than 10 minutes. How would Bisq ever fix this if it's doing like an on-chain transaction or it's doing this thing, right? So until we get the V2 trade protocol up and running, which is totally on Lightning, and after, we have to build all this stuff. Then we have to make the app really slick and make it on the same level. I mean, these guys are VC funded, right? Bisq can't get VC funding to hire a whole team of developers, because if we had to get VC funding, we'd have to make a company, and then we wouldn't be censorship resistant. So we have to make all these sacrifices to just, be able to not have to comply with all these evil KYC government regulations. And it'll take us a while to do it, but yeah, we will build the infrastructure that will power the next generation of basically how the world runs. The internet was this founding layer, and next it's going to be Bitcoin, then Lightning, and maybe Bisq will even be like layer 3 by then, right? If Bisq runs on top of Lightning instead of layer 1 Bitcoin, it's just building up the stack.
Yeah.
I envision like a total future where everyone's running like either Raspberry Pi or even just an iPhone or some Android phone where they have a Bitcoin full node, a Lightning full node, Bisq full node, and a BTC Pay server so they can do merchant processing. Maybe like a few other apps like a Block Explorer, Mempool Visualizer. Like these would all just be apps on a phone, right? And it would be so simple to just, install these 10 apps, and you have financial self-sovereignty. You don't need any banks. You don't need any government ID. You don't need to pay taxes. You don't need to do any of this legacy stuff. It's like going to the post office and putting a stamp on a letter just to communicate with someone. You have to pay like 50 cents per message. It's kind of hilarious now, but that is literally how the world ran for hundreds of years, right? Thousands of years even. I don't know. Yeah.
Sounds like the dream.
Do you think we'll will benefit from this vision seen out to fruition, or do you think that'll be a generation or two after us?
I don't know. We always think engineers always think we can build it in like probably 1/3 of the time it actually takes, right? And I think that's why like a lot of Bitcoin early adopters were like over bullish. Even me with my own like Bitcoin mining business, I was like way too over leveraged on the miners or something like this. And but eventually we learn. We make the hard mistakes. We learn the lessons the hard way, and then we keep at it. Cypherpunks don't really give up. They just kind of keep writing this code. I mean, how long did it take Bisq? Like 5 years to get to this point? It's going to take another 5 years to get to the next milestone of everyone has Bisq in their pocket or something. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how long has Bitcoin been around? About 11 years now?
Almost.
And still, like, maybe there's some more common apps like Cash App or something now that has more Bitcoin stuff, but it's like very slowly getting into like this mainstream.
Disclaimer, Cash is a sponsor of the podcast. That's a joke we do here. Yeah.
They are a sponsor of the podcast.
I tried to use the app, but I guess you need like a government ID to use it, so I couldn't use it.
Yeah. And it's U.S. only.
Wait, so you don't have a government ID?
Well, not from the U.S.
Yeah, it's U.S. only.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, like you need like a driver's license, and I don't have a driver's license either.
But like both Cash App and Bisq play important roles in mainstream adoption in completely opposite ways, right? Like the idea that you could have the #1 finance app on the App Store accepting Bitcoin and allowing you to buy Bitcoin and allowing you to spend Bitcoin with their like credit card, debit card, processing is a game changer. And then being able to trade without any permission or without any KYC is an absolute game changer on the other end, right?
Yeah. Attacking it from both angles. But as the conversation of this episode has been around, like how, like obviously, ideally, the non-custodial, non-KYC AML solutions are probably best for the individual. It's how do we make that more popular? And
Well, there's trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can trade some of your security, privacy, and freedom for convenience. And currently, the whole world does this when they use a credit card or when they use a bank account. It's like a common thing that Bitcoiners will tweet on Twitter. They'll say, yeah, when you put money in the bank, it's not your money anymore. You're just a creditor of the bank. And it's true. You're just trading all of your basically individual rights for this little bit of convenience.
But I'm confident. Well, I like that convenience, but I'm also confident in the ability to sort of hide your trail off the app, right? Are you confident in that ability? Or how would you recommend people using these centralized systems act after they move their Bitcoin from them? Or does it even matter?
I mean, like I use this, I found one app where I can charge like a prepaid Visa card anonymously without KYC, but using Bitcoin. And eventually it like hits some limit and then you have to delete it and then reinstall the app and make a new one. But because it's anonymous, you can just make infinite number of them, right? So that's kind of like a loophole I found. Like in Japan, there's this another loophole I found where you can actually do anonymous bank transfers in Japan up to 100,000 yen, which is like $1,000. And you can do an infinite amount of those, obviously. So this is one thing I want to bake into Bisq is where we added the Japan bank transfer payment method into Bisq, but I want to add this like anonymous bank transfer. So you would know the bank info of the maker, but you wouldn't know who's buying it from you, right? Because you would just get this money deposited in your account, and they would put the Bisq trade ID as their name, and then you would send Bitcoin to their address, and you would have no idea who you transacted with, right?
So there'd be a bunch of 999 yen.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah. Damn, man. What else do we got here? It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for all you've done for Bitcoin over the years. I haven't said thank you yet in the space over the years. So I guess let's talk about the altcoins. And so do you think any of them have merit? Like I'm going to talk about Ethereum in particular. Ethereum going to ETH 2.0. Like people seem very bullish on it. I've been talking to people more recently who are looking at the specs of what it's going to take to run a fully validating node on ETH 2.0 and validating the shards across each other. If you're really like an exchange or something, you're probably going to have to run 5 or 6 nodes to validate the shards across each other. And some people are crunching the numbers saying the node cost may be upwards of like $10,000 to $20,000 a month. And Like if that's the case,
It's just security theater, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you want censorship resistance, it has to be decentralized. And to be decentralized, you have to have very small blocks and you can't charge $10,000 a month to run a full node. So, I don't know. I mean, why are they doing this? What is the real goal here? Is it to help corporations do blockchainy stuff? They don't really need a blockchain for a lot of this stuff, right? It's just they could use a centralized database like they've been using for years and years. It's just a lot of it I feel is not really justified. It's like this Rube Goldberg machine, right? You make this highly complicated blockchain, but for what? You don't really gain any. Like look the DAO bailout was a good example, right? If it was really decentralized, then you wouldn't have been able to bail out the DAO.
Yeah, but it persists today, and that shocked me. That's what I was interested in Ethereum a little bit up until
Did it
the DAO.
though? I thought Ethereum is kind of dying now. I mean, what's the
price is pumping, right?
Well, according to Udi, Tron is going to replace Ethereum.
I mean, apparently Tether on Ethereum is a big use case now.
I think there's a metaphor here or an analogy. I don't know the difference between those two, but between like Bisq and all these so-called decentralized exchanges that literally just slap the word decentralized in front of it, and they just say like, "Oh, we're a decentralized exchange," but it's just a marketing term to them.
Well, it's
to
like
Bisq,
it's like an atomic swap, right? It's like trivially easy to swap two tokens on the same blockchain. You just have a smart contract that does this, right? So is that an exchange or is that more of a swap?
right, but I'm just saying, like, they have centralized market makers, they have centralized this or that. They're not actually trying to prioritize censorship resistance. They're taking VC funding. They have a board that's like managing the token and all this stuff. But they just slap it on for marketing. There's no actual drive there to prioritize censorship resistance, right? And that's what we see with Bitcoin is the value prop is the censorship resistance. It's the immutability, right? So if you don't prioritize that, like, you lose it. And it's about long-term priorities.
Yeah. Steve, haven't heard from you in a bit, man. What drove you to this space, dude?
So I actually have a background that's probably the polar opposite of Wiz. I kind of, in terms of the early days, like just through school and my first jobs, I was always on the traditional path of like do well in school and get a good job. And I got my first job, and like within the first month or two, I was like, this is it. And like I started learning, like I had so much free time at work, just bored, not doing anything, that I started to look at some of the more fringe financial sites and discovered Mises.org and Zero Hedge and all these places. And it was just like a storm. Like, what is going on? Nothing is the way I thought it was. And so that's what eventually led me to Bitcoin and this whole space and questioning everything.
I had a very similar path. I was sitting.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the people I work with, and it was a great experience working for the fun that I did. But I was sitting there, I was like, again, bored most of the day, like reading about Bitcoin and then having to dress up in khakis and a button up and sit there for 8 hours straight. I was like, I physically like had an aversion to it. I had to actually quit on my birthday because nobody said happy birthday to me. No, but it's crazy. It's crazy that it always surprised me. I've done 115 episodes of the show, Tales from the Crypt. We hear people's tales. It's crazy how many people have very similar tales, and it seems that this is almost common sense, especially if you have an understanding of how the system works. And it's something that makes me more confident in Bitcoin moving to the future, and I wish we could just make more people realize this quicker, right? So that's why we do this.
That's actually like one of the biggest fears, and Greg Maxwell said this recently, like the biggest threat to Bitcoin is that nobody will understand why censorship resistance is valuable. And that pretty much sums it up, right? Like the Ethereum versus Ethereum Classic debate really proved this to be true, is that most people have no clue why Bitcoin is valuable. In fact, if I just tweet it out right now, like, why is Bitcoin valuable? You probably see some really wild answers. You really have to study, like, Saifedean's doing this course right now, like the principles of economics, and he's talking about like the hardness of money and all these things. And it's like, once you start studying money, you're like, oh my God, this is so obviously like
fucked up. We need to fix
like
it.
Why would anyone do this fiat money system, right? It's just horrible. And then you learn that gold was the hardest money for thousands of years for all these very logical reasons. And once you understand that reasoning, then you'll see why Bitcoin is going to be even better and why everyone will eventually move back to it, right? And yeah, you just got to study a tiny little bit, and then you're red pilled, you're woke, right?
How do we stop people from being apathetic? That's my biggest fear too, is apathy. And again, we've talked about this, they'll be forced to not be apathetic. Here in America in particular, because again, another driving theme is like I had a boss when I was working at that fund. I love the people I work with. Dimitri, he was born and raised in the USSR, immigrated to the US in the 90s, and he was the one who really like spooked me. He was like, Marty, ever since like the Patriot Act, this is slowly turning into what I ran away from, like in the 90s. And it's frogs boiling in water, but people are just used to convenience, and the culture in America right now is like drinking, music about doing drugs and shit like that. It doesn't seem like we have like long-term goals to build. There's no space race right now. That's why I'm into Bitcoin, because I think Bitcoin's like analogous to like a space race, something bigger than the individuals involved.
I think the doomsday scenarios are certainly there for like the big like socialist, communist kinds of things that people have run away from in the past. But I think in this country, some of the motivators might be on a smaller scale. So I remember like a few months ago, I came across this guy who produced comic books, and for some dumb reason, he was kicked off PayPal, and he had nowhere else no other way to accept money for his comic books. And he was like, oh, I found Bitcoin, and it was like the perfect thing, because like nobody can kick me off of that. And I've seen a couple other cases like that, and I think a few more of those happen at scale. I mean, these companies are known to be kind of unpredictable.
It just happened to Pornhub.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that could certainly be a motivator.
Yeah. No, it's almost like the people in control of the incumbent system are sowing its own demise, right? They're pushing people to the edge to a point.
Like gun sales. I think like Bank of America or Citigroup, one of those people announced that they were not going to allow those vendors to use their products.
Yeah.
And legal weed has this issue. Yeah, we see it all over the place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People get burned and then they learn. But it's very much a social movement, and people have to be vigilant and active and contribute. And
yeah. You
don't realize that you're a slave to this system until the system cuts you out and you have no other choice but Bitcoin. And imagine just 11 years ago, you did not even have Bitcoin as a choice. You were just in this totalitarian banking system. It's a real eye-opener when you see it like that.
Yeah. It's again, I'm excited to be on the front lines with you gentlemen. Is there anything I don't want to force anything. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on in particular? Matt?
I was actually kind of a little bit random, but I had this in my back of my head. How does, like, if there's a new market, how does that get decided on Bisq? Like, if you want to add a new fiat pair or something like that, like, how does that proposal work? Does that go to the DAO? Or does it get voted on? Or
yeah, that's a good question. We get a lot of ICO scams that want to add their token to Bisq, and Bisq has like a no ICO policy and a no Bcash policy. So basically, no scams.
I love it.
And because it's actually like, it would make Bisq look really bad if some scammers were selling their tokens on Bisq, and then they, the regulators are saying, oh, Bisq is enabling these people to lose money, right? Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? How does that process work? Who's deciding?
Yeah, I mean, people make a pull request on GitHub to add their either asset or payment method. Assets are a lot easier to add than payment methods. Payment methods, you usually have to do quite a bit of work. You have to make like the UI where you can, integrate. But assets, I mean, how many assets get added every month, would you say?
Probably like at least 3 or 4.
Yeah.
With each new release.
So that aspect is that approval process is still a little bit centralized, no?
No, I mean, the community, the maintainers kind of, we have like a policy that the DAO, voted on at some time in the past, and then the maintainers just kind of enforce that policy.
Got it.
So the adding an asset is pretty much up to the maintainers, and then removing an asset would be where the DAO would come in.
True.
So if for some reason some asset that was really controversial or became really controversial, then you could put up a request to remove an asset in the DAO as a proposal.
Fair.
Why no Bcash in particular?
Because it's a scam.
Yeah.
There were some legal concerns too, because I think sometime about a year ago there were some exchanges being sued for I don't know the exact reasons, but so there was some concern that Bisq would attract the wrong kind of attention.
Yeah.
That was the origin of it, but of course.
No, I mean
It's
they
a
were
scam anyway.
they were marketing Bitcoin Cash as the real Bitcoin, which is
Right.
an obvious lie, and it's a scam.
Yeah. That's actually, while we're on this topic, what do you think happens once Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, I guess, too, hit their halving, like 5,000, like they're 5,000 blocks ahead of Bitcoin? Like, will that be the end of the exchange, you think, a halving?
I don't know. There's there's some coins that have been around for a long time.
Well, the nature of SHA-256 mining too, right? Like, wouldn't those miners still?
I mean, yeah, they could get 51% attacked any day now.
It's
right?
weird it hasn't happened yet, right?
Yeah.
I've
you
been
don't-
surprised.
I want more chain attacks.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there was all this Bcash like conspiracy theories that Blockstream was trying to kill Bcash, and now they could literally do it like whenever they wanted. But Blockstream has like such a great reputation, like as like why would they even want to burn their own reputation just to destroy this scam coin that's just going to die out on its own natural course, right? Makes no sense. And they have like big pockets, right? They have a big budget supporting it. They have market maker bots to do this. They have like a huge marketing team, all kinds of sponsored content on
Bcash.
yeah. I mean, it's just.
And it's illiquid, so it's easy to try and prop up the
They got
price.
forced hard forks in, right?
I have no idea.
I saw.
Too much Bcash conversation.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Who cares?
I was just really surprised because I remember when it was the game theory of Bitcoin mining and running a node and stuff is like one of my favorite aspects of Bitcoin. And I get really excited just thinking about it and running through scenarios. And I was completely wrong about, I thought Bitcoin Cash and SV would have gotten attacked way long ago.
Right, because you
and
can short it and then attack it and then make some huge profits. And I'm sure there are some, crypto anarchists out there that will eventually do it.
One day,
Yeah. Because the ASICs are getting more and more powerful every day. People are building huge mining farms every day. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah. Do you?
Monocoin in Japan got a block withholding attack, and a few other like minor, like small chains had these like block withholding attacks, which is actually very easy to do. You don't need 51%. You only need like 10%, and then you can try it in secret. And you just try it like 10 times, and your 10% of hash power will just by pure luck solve like 50% of the blocks in this short time, and you can do a block withholding attack on an exchange and basically rip off the exchange. So, the only real defense against that is just increasing the number of confirmations. But at some point, they're going to realize like there's no number of confirmations that would make these cryptocurrencies secure, right? You can't really have more than one with the same mining algorithm ASIC out there.
Well, it's funny how many times we have to learn this lesson, right? Because Namecoin was probably the first to learn this lesson, right? Like
That's
Ryan
true.
Shea and
Feathercoin.
yeah.
I wasn't like Aurora Coin too got like forked into oblivion. There's like 5 hard forks all at the same time, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's actually that was actually one of the first Bitcoin events I went to was here in the city to hear Ryan Shea present on why Namecoin didn't work out in the end because they were sharing SHA-256. It's interesting, and but
that was a real shame because Satoshi was like really behind Namecoin.
yeah, because what it was like, he was trying to do DNS or something. No,
Right, just he didn't want to have all the domain, like the namespace mixed in with the money, right? Because at the end of the day, like you can only have like one hard money, which is obviously Bitcoin, right? So all these other like Litecoin or Bcash, or all these just basically copycats that copy Bitcoin and tweak a few things and say we're better. That's not really how hard money works, right? It's about the hardness of the money and the underlying economic things, and then you have the security of it, which we're talking about now. Is like, you're going to put all your life savings in Bcash or and risk a 51% attack, or you're going to put it in Bitcoin where you know it's like very safe that it's going to hold its value over time.
and all these offshoots that pitch themselves based off of technical details really undervalue the social aspect of it all, the social layer of Bitcoiners running the network and stuff like that.
Yeah, marketing works. Like uninformed masses will go to the shitcoin casinos and they'll FOMO and they'll gamble and they will, they'll learn the hard way.
Is this a
Gotta
lesson?
touch the stove.
Is this a lesson that's going to happen into perpetuity, or do you see like shitcoinery fading out?
I don't know. It became easier and easier every iteration of shitcoins. Remember in the beginning there was like you had to actually copy Bitcoin and rename it and do mining. You actually had to make like some proof of work algorithm, and then you had like Feathercoin. That was like the first iteration of altcoins, right?
Right.
Multi-script mining, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, there was like 10 different algorithms in one and all these things, and then those all died. I remember there's even stuff like Hawaii coin and like stuff you never.
Zeta coin.
Yeah, and then became like the Ethereum ERC20 tokens was I think like the next big wave, right? So it became like much easier. You could literally just click a button and deploy a smart contract and do it. And now maybe the next wave will be like Bitcoin side chains or something like this, where you have some kind of virtual assets. They're probably not going to go after the hard money argument, because by that time it'll probably be more obvious to the uninformed masses that Bitcoin is the hard money. They'll probably try and do some other, like what Ethereum's trying to do now, where they're trying to move away. I don't know, is it money or is it not? I don't know what they're going to market it as.
They seem conflicted.
Yeah, I mean, at some point they have to admit defeat.
Unstoppable applications. World computer. Touring complete.
It'll run on a Raspberry Pi, right?
I think like that was one of the big things about the 2017 altcoin pump was the flippening narrative, right? So I feel like that flippening narrative will subside. Like people won't believe that you could replace Bitcoin, but there'll still obviously be shitcoins going around and people trading them and being greedy and gambling on it. It's like one of the primary use cases of Bitcoin, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Everyone's a scammer. Beware, freaks. Did you ever? Bisq is a big trading platform. Do you guys like trade personally, markets, or no?
I don't know.
I don't.
No.
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is a privacy-oriented platform,
That's true.
right?
Yeah. That's true.
See, nobody knows. That's the whole point. But if you ask CZ at Binance, he could tell you your whole trading history.
Yeah, and give you a picture of yourself holding your passport right back to you too.
ID selfie. Yeah, I made a joke on our internal chat channel the other day.
Feedback here. Sorry, freaks. Oh, no, there we go.
I made a joke on our internal chat the other day. I said, oh no, someone impersonated me on the chat, and they told Steve to send all the customer holdings to this scammer, and they stole all the customer holdings off of Bisq. And one of the guys in the chat was like, what, really? And I was like, no, dude, like Bisq doesn't hold any customer funds. All the money is on your hardware, on your private keys. Like that's the whole point of software. And they're like, oh. And then the whole, everyone was like, LOL and stuff. And it's like once you realize that this is a better system, there's no risk of this ID selfie leak. There's no risk of passports being leaked. It's just, you solve all those problems by avoiding it entirely, by working around it.
Do you think we get a lot of pushback from governments? Is this going to be a long, drawn-out battle, or do you think it?
Not so much, because I live in Japan, and I think the biggest concern of at least the Japanese government is they don't want Japanese people to lose money, because they want another Mt. Gox situation, right? They had Mt. Gox, Coincheck, Zyfe, BitPoint. All of these Japanese exchanges were hacked. I mean, there's only like 20-something licensed, and 4 of them were hacked. So it's not like, the best record. And anyway, the point is, because Bisq doesn't hold any funds, there's no risk of this. And more importantly, even if you wanted to regulate Bisq, you couldn't, because it's just this open source software that everyone runs, right? So you can't show up at the Bisq corporate headquarters with, police or something and demand it, because we don't have to abide by any jurisdiction, because we're not a company. We're just this community of individuals. And that's so powerful, right?
Well, I feel like the way you would do it is you would like insert undercover agents into one side of the trade, right? Like that's kind of what they did with local Bitcoins in America, at least, is you would be trading with someone and that person was an undercover agent. And then once you hit a certain amount, they would like hit you with money laundering or something like that.
I think that was a big scare tactic by like some kind of propaganda, government propaganda. They probably did it like once.
Yeah, and then you scare the shit out of everyone. That's the key. And then you scare them into compliance.
The U.S. government is very good at this fear tactic that the system will get you if you do anything bad. So you better conform. You better pay your taxes, citizen. You know.
No thought.
But I like see that attack vector coming. That's the move they make is they like say you have to disclose your Bitcoin. Like not even just in Bisq. Like you have to disclose your Bitcoin, and then they pick like 1 or 2 people. They throw the book at them and then scare 70-80% into compliance, stuff like that. I mean, right?
we can improve the privacy. You know, cypherpunks will adapt. Then at the end of the day, the cypherpunks will always win over the governments of the world. I don't know, Steve. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think the account signing is a great example of this. I mean, you would think that if you can't solve the problem of fraud with the traditional KYC, like that, it's not a solved problem. Like exchanges and all kinds of financial institutions can't solve the problem with all of these overly sophisticated KYC measures. How would a super highly private network do that? Well, we found a way with account signing, and it's just going to become better and better over time. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty confident whatever obstacles, we'll find a way.
Right. If your account is signed, it shows the account age, like, oh, this account's 6 months old, and he's posted a bond. So he's putting his own money up to stake. It's like, yeah, this guy's not going to scam you. You can feel relatively confident.
Right.
Why would a scammer like work for 6 months and put his own money on the line just to screw me over like $1,000 or something? He could have like 10,000, or maybe some whale market makers would put a huge amount of stake on there just so that they would have the highest reputation score. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, this is basically it, right? KYC. It doesn't actually solve the security problem. Right. It just invades everyone's privacy so that it kind of maybe reduces it a little bit. But if you actually make a secure system, then you don't need KYC. And this is so obvious to the cypherpunks, right?
Yeah, well, and then as more and more of these dumps happen, like it just becomes like KYC. It's number one, it seems so stupid. Then you're like, obviously this is so stupid. Like, and then you start thinking like, are there alternative motives for this? Like, is it evil, right? Like intentionally evil.
You ever use WeChat Pay in China?
I've never used it.
This is the worst thing I've ever seen. And if you ask any person in China, they'll say you cannot live without WeChat. In Japan, or in Korea, they use like Kakao or Naver, and in Japan they use Line. In USA, they use like Facebook and WhatsApp. Like you tell the average American, like, yeah, delete your Facebook, delete your WhatsApp. They're like, oh no, I use that to talk to everyone. But it's obviously backdoored by the government, and they're doing this mass surveillance. If the government has this much of a stronghold in all of your personal connections, all of your financial transactions, they can just seize your account anytime. I mean, I don't know. We have to educate the masses. We have to really free the slaves. You know, it's just.
That's what we're trying to do here. Like, is there any, like, God damn it, this fucking feedback. I don't know what it is. I think it's one of the new. You know what it is? It's this. Fuck, what was I gonna say? I just lost track because of the feedback. What was your last comment there?
China, WeChat, Facebook.
Oh, China, WeChat. And that's something I actually wrote about earlier this week, is that prototype that was proven on the Lightning Network. What's that? So you can basically build a WeChat on top of Bitcoin, right? Like, so they built like a messaging system.
I don't think that's
Lightning.
The correct usage of, like, Bitcoin is kind of like this payment network. Mm-hmm. If you want to build like a censorship-resistant chat app, probably Tor is the correct network to build that on, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is like a totally different use case. It's going to be extremely expensive. I'm not sure why you would build a chat network on top of a payment network.
That's it was an interesting, like, you could send messages via Lightning. Well, this guy was doing it without spending any money, but
Tor is free.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I think is cool is that you can use like a Lightning public key as a like an identity system or like a reputation system, but you don't have to actually run the actual messages through the network to do that.
Yeah, Tor has an identity system. The Onion addresses the public key hash. Yeah. I don't understand that.
I thought what was interesting, I would just wanted to go back a little bit, is that you mentioned earlier, and then it kind of went off in a tangent, and I've seen you mention it on Twitter too, and it's a strategy that I prescribe to as well, is in this intermediate gap where, you know, you might need to use WhatsApp or you might need to use WeChat or something. It's important. A good strategy to use is to basically have two different devices. You have like your KYC device, and then you have your private, more, you know.
Yeah, there's some loopholes you can do. You might want to have like an iPhone that's totally KYC'd and a Graphene OS, which is a privacy-oriented fork of Android device for your lockdown apps, and just kind of separate the two, because it's basically free to make a new online identity, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of loopholes you can exploit. I'm obviously like, you know, against using any backdoored app, but a lot of people will use them for some purposes. I
mean,
don't like
we use Twitter, right?
Yeah, on my iPhone, but not on my Android. Yeah,
that's the key, is that separation, the isolation.
Yeah, it's just it depends on your, you know, any security depends on your threat model, and you got to have like a multi-layered solution. I guess that's a whole conversation in itself. I mean, are you worried about the government seeing who you talk to online? Are you worried about the government seeing your financial transactions? You know, you have to take that specific threat model and either mix your coins or, you know, use Keybase or some other privacy-oriented chat app. I mean, there's different things you can do. Depends on the exact problem. And
there's a lot of nuance.
Sure. I mean, it's not like use Signal, use Tor, and then that solves all your problems, right? It's
privacy will never be. Do you think like privacy will never be the most convenient option, just because of the trade-offs?
No, it can be. It's just that it's always easier to implement, you know, like an unprivate system. Mm-hmm. It's always easier. It's always easier to just say, all right, everyone put all their money in this box, right? And if someone steals the box, oh well. Versus if you actually make a secure system, then you know you would never do something silly. So yeah, it's like a lot of work, and people like to take shortcuts, and they like to sacrifice security and privacy and freedom because they don't value it, or they don't appreciate it as much, or they trust people they shouldn't trust, right? It's like the more business deals you do, the more conflicts you have, the more you realize that a trustless system is probably a better way for the world to interact with each other. Like imagine how much money is scammed every day off credit cards. And if you pay with cash, you're kind of subsidizing this fraud because you don't get like a 3% discount if you pay cash, right? So, you know, there's a lot of trade-off systems.
No, it was, speaking of the credit card fraud, like that was like a Vice documentary that they actually took down because I think it was so powerful in showing how to easily pull off credit card fraud. They were using Bitcoin on the dark web to buy basically credit cards and cards and millions of
credit card companies don't want you to know about this. I think it was Mythbusters also did an episode about how easy it was to hack credit cards. And like they said, like the general counsel of like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, like just called them up and was like, yo, you are not going to do this episode. We're going to sue you. And, you know, of course, they're like a TV network. They're like, okay, you know, back down immediately. So, yeah, I mean, those scare tactic works. They have a lot to lose. It's like multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Like if you're taking, it's like a tax, right? So you take like 3% of every credit card transaction in the whole world every day. And, yeah, they don't want that machine to stop.
No. And it's, I mean, again, Bitcoin being a push system solves this. And that's something actually the company I work for is an online ad platform. And they deal with a lot of publishers and had a huge credit card chargeback problem and started accepting Bitcoin in like 2014 because of that specifically. So, and it does work.
You ever try to use your credit card for something and then the bank blocks it because they suspect you're like a fraudulent transaction, and then you just pay with Bitcoin instead, and of course it works perfectly fine?
Oh, I wish I could do that. Nobody accepts Bitcoin in the city. Again, this happened to me 3 times in the last month, and I'm sitting there trying to pay a bill at a bar or something, looking like an asshole, and like waiting for that text from my bank so I can reply, yes, I'm using my card. Like, if they had provided a QR code, I would have gladly played.
You know, the other payment method that cannot get declined is cash.
Yes, I'm a big cash guy. Always got a lot of cash on me. That's what actually, I was introduced to money via cash. I worked at a hot dog stand in South Jersey every summer, starting at age 13 to 21, and I got paid out in cash every day. So I have a very big emotional affinity to cash there. It's good. It feels good to have like a wad of cash and just be able to pull it out.
And when did you get your first paycheck and notice that they took half?
And when I started working at a bar during the school year, my senior year of high school, and that's when that happened. Yeah.
I heard that in USA, like bartenders make most of their money off of the tips.
Tips, yeah.
And like they usually just paid on the books like minimum wage or something to like.
Less than minimum wage. Like you get paid $3 an hour and you depend on tips.
How could they do less than minimum wage?
It's some weird loop. And
There's a carve out for the service industry,
Oh,
as long as your tips pass the minimum wage,
Oh,
like
that's
broken
disgusting.
down.
yeah. Yeah.
Might as well not even get the minimum wage then and just.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But now it's actually a problem because most people are paying with credit cards.
Right.
Like I've seen in this city the move to cashlessness, and it hasn't even been pushed by the government. It's a
better UX.
Pushed by
Yeah.
the coffee shops.
Yeah, it's pushed by the.
You bought this coffee. You can't use cash there.
Yeah, I couldn't use cash.
Really?
At it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's legal tender for all debts,
crazy.
public and private.
Yeah.
It says on the bank now.
That's why I'm actually pumped to be from Philadelphia, where historically very liberal city made it illegal for companies or businesses not to accept cash. Like, so if they try to go credit cardless, they can't.
But even the places that accept cash, like people have a desire to pay with their Apple Pay or their,
'Cause
their
it has a
credit
superior
card or
UX.
whatever. Yeah.
Think about it. It's like you have to count out all these bills and coins and
Change.
it's like dirty money and oh yeah, I just tap my phone and it's so easy and so cool and I get some points, and they give you all these.
You should have seen how fast this motherfucker fell into the Face ID. Like they picked up an iPhone.
Well, the fact that
Talked into
the
the
fact that there's no fingerprint is ridiculous. Is that there's no fingerprint reader on the fucking iPhone? But yeah, I just bought my first iPhone through my work. They provided it, and now I'm experimenting with graphene on an Android. Basically, like fully lock it down.
It has the fingerprint sensor on the back. Really cool.
On what?
I have a 3A, which
Yeah.
is Pixel. Yeah, it has a.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like the I think you turn off the biometric when you're like going through like border crossings, stuff like that, and you also just try and like keep it you keep it separate. You try and keep everything isolated, but there's no perfect solution here. You don't want to enter your 20-digit passphrase like in front of people.
Yeah.
So like
Android has that really cool like pattern, which
Yeah.
is actually like if you make it depends on if you make it stupid or make it hard to guess, right? But yeah, if you make a cool Android pattern, that could actually be like mathematically much harder to crack than a number, I think, even, right? You can make the grid like 8 by 8
right.
or something crazy, yeah. But
You can make it mathematically harder. It makes sense, right? Random connections.
because if you think about like how many possible chess moves are there,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you need like some kind of quantum computer to calculate this. But how many numbers can you put in on like 8 digits? Well, yeah, that's only like 100 million. So
Fascinating. This has been incredible. Almost 2 hours. Fuck, man. I can't believe you flew to New York to come speak to us. We don't deserve that type of love, man.
oh yeah, well, you guys are cool. So Miss American Hodl also flew to meet you guys too, right?
Yeah. It was
Shorter
fun.
flight though.
Shorter flight.
Oh, don't
definitely
dox him now.
I'm not going to, but it was shorter. Most places are shorter than where you came from, so.
shorter. Yeah. It's fun. It's crazy being able to meet people I've been following online and admiring from afar for a while now. Again, thank you for what you're doing, Steve. Working on Bisq. Bisq is let's end it on Bisq. It's an incredibly important project in the space. How can people help?
Oh, just follow the project on GitHub, join our Keybase, and just get a pulse for what's going on and where you can possibly help. I think it's a common misconception that we only need developers. Developers are certainly very important and we could use more, but we can use help across a whole number of functions. So no matter what you do, there's probably a way you can fit in.
We don't need developers. We need cypherpunks. We need
Yeah.
Bitcoiners. We need the real crypto anarchists who want to be part of this really cool thing. Because, you look at Bitcoin, they have all the VC funding, they have hundreds of developers working on Bitcoin and Lightning. There's like 3 different implementations, all VC backed. But Bisq is like totally bootstrapped from the community directly. And, if you're used to like a steady paycheck every month, this is like a big change, right? Because now you're basically setting your own salary, submitting to the DAO for compensation, and trading on this purely private and free exchange. Like, if you're a real cypherpunk, you will just fall in love with Bisq. And even if you're just a Bitcoiner, you'll love trading on Bisq. And I think it's the coolest project to work on right now.
Agreed.
Got anything tended on here, Matthew?
Fuck yes, Bisque is awesome.
Again, thank you for your time, guys. It's been a pleasure. Peace and love, freaks.